Has anybody ever tried to watch two races at the same time? Not exactly the easiest thing to do. But that's basically what I had to do today with the IndyCar race at Circuit of the Americas and the Cup race at Martinsville. It's kind of an alright day for racing. Let's get into it. This is Final Analysis. What is happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to this week's edition of Final Analysis. This week we had the second race of the IndyCar season at the Circuit of the Americas for the inaugural IndyCar Classic, and NASCAR was at Martinsville this weekend, so the Xfinity guys were off, but the truck guys were in action on Saturday. As far as the overall racing goes, it was alright. I mean, the IndyCar race, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. I mean, it went by pretty quickly. I mean, there was only one caution. And quite the surprise that happened in that race, too. And we'll get to that in a bit. And Martinsville, it was also okay. I think it was definitely an above-average race. Maybe not what we totally expected for a Martinsville race, but it was actually pretty solid, in my opinion, despite the fact that Brad Keselowski dominated the race, which we'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's quickly run through the truck race that happened. Kyle Busch won. And it was his 201st career NASCAR National Series victory. Who gives a f***? Moving on. So let's get into the IndyCar review. Second one of the year. This one at the Circuit of the Americas for the 2019 IndyCar Classic. There were a lot of unknowns coming into this race, considering the fact that this was the first race that IndyCar has ever held at Circuit of the Americas. So we didn't really know what to expect other than what we saw in what they called spring training, which is basically a spring test session to get the drivers acclimated to Circuit of the Americas. So let's go ahead and get into the race review. So Will Power won the pole. Of course, he's 2 for 2 in poles this year. And Circuit of the Americas had a program to where if the pole winner also happens to win the race, they would get a $100,000 bonus. And for the majority of this race, it definitely looked like Will Power was going to pull it off. So let's get into it. So Will Power leads the field to the green. Had a crazy as all hell start. One of the things that IndyCar decided to put into effect was the fact that they decided not to put in track limits, which means that if it's paved, you can run on it, and if you're wrecked, that's on you. Okay. So Zach Veach spins in the S's after getting into the left rear of Graham Rahal. He was able to keep it going, but had a damaged tow rod. And it also showed on his onboard when he was going straight, but the wheel was kind of conked to the right. So they had to get that repaired. So Rossi challenged his Power for the lead on lap 3, but wasn't able to get to it. Rookie Colton Herta was definitely going to be one to watch in this race, considering the fact that he was super fast in all the test sessions at Circuit of the Americas. So he was definitely going to be the one to watch. Had a good crowd for this race. It was extremely cloudy, so it looked like I had a chance for some rain in this race, but it didn't happen. So the top 3 are still close 6 laps into the race. Marcus Ericsson was the first to come in for new tires on lap 7. Piggott, Bourdais, and Veach went 3 wide going into turn 12 around this point. So that was a bit hairy. Colton Herta, almost said Brian Herta. Colton Herta gets around Rossi for the second position. And the top 3 are within 1.5 seconds of each other at this point. Pato O'Ward, who's making his season debut, he gets around Graham Rahal with a great move. Basically, he was side by side with Rahal for a couple of corners and then was able to get around him. O'Ward gets around Felix Rosenqvist for 8th. Rossi gets back around Herta for the second position. Will Power comes in on lap 29, which was his second stop of the day, and he holds on to the lead. Santino Ferrucci tries to go all Dukes of Hazzard in turn 12, and he was lucky that he didn't damage the car. Rosenqvist spins in turn 12 but gets it back going. Unfortunately for him, that wouldn't be the last time he spins. Rossi continues to chase Power for the lead 2/3 of the way through the race. Rahal gets around Ericsson for 7th in turn 12. At this point, Power and Rossi are only about a second apart, and they are about 14 seconds ahead of the field, and it's run green all through this point. Brian Herta would make his final stop on lap 44, and it would turn out to be the race-winning move, because the one and only caution comes out on lap 44 when Rosenqvist gets spun by James Hinchcliffe coming towards the final turn. And this completely turns the race upside down, because Will Power, Alexander Rossi, and Scott Dixon had not pitted yet. Oof. And that has got to be a sick feeling if you're the leader and everybody else behind you has already made pit stops and you haven't, and the caution comes out. That's the worst feeling in the world. And then things would only get worse for Will Power, as he would have, I believe they said it was a drive shaft issue in the pits. So his race was over after leading pretty much the entire thing up until he made that pit stop, and then he breaks the drive shaft. So his race was done. And that means that Colton Herta would assume the lead on the restart, and I was like, oh my god, he could actually win this race. He had already made his pit stop, and other than Rossi and Will Power, he was the fastest car on the track. So Colton Herta leads on the restart. Graham Rahal and RHR fight for the final spot on the podium, but hunter-reay holds Rahal at bay. Bourdais gets around Pato O'Ward for 5th. Rossi gets a little bit airborne after contact with Pagenaud, but I think he manages to come home with a top 10 finish. Herta pulls away from Joseph Newgarden, who inherited 2nd, and Colton Herta wins the IndyCar Classic at the Circuit of the Americas for his first career win and just his 3rd career start. Wow. And not only that, we also got to see a little bit of history, as Colton Herta becomes the youngest driver in the history of the IndyCar Series to win, at the tender age of 18 years, 11 months, and 22 days. Unreal. This was just his 3rd career start. And yes, it may have gotten handed to him on a silver platter when that caution came out, but a win's a win. And he had pretty much shown speed all weekend. So congratulations to Colton Herta. Joseph Newgarden and Ryan Hunter-Reay round out the podium. So overall, I think it was an alright race. It wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible either. It was kind of right around the middle. So my final rating for the IndyCar Classic at Circuit of the Americas, I'll give it a 4.75 out of 10. So, like I said, wasn't terrible, wasn't great either, but it was right around the middle. And we got a surprise winner out of it, so it's all good. Alright, now we come to the Cup Series race. The STP 500 at Martinsville. So this was a race that a lot of people had circled on their calendar because obviously, based on past history, Martinsville has shown to give us some good races. And while I don't think it quite lived up to the billing this time around, it wasn't as disappointing as the previous spring race was. This one, it was also pretty solid. It wasn't spectacular by any stretch of the imagination, but it was alright. It was solid. So let's go ahead and get into it. Joey Logano wins the pole. Stages 1 and 2, 130 laps. Stage 3, 240 laps. So Logano leads lap 1, but he would only lead about 4 or 5 laps before Brad Keselowski would put the bumper to him and get around him for our first pure lead change of the day on lap 7. There would not be many in this race, unfortunately. This race had the lowest pure lead change count of the year at just 2. So Brad Keselowski takes the lead on lap 7, and I kid you not, would lead for the next 321 laps. It was some crazy number like that, but anyways, it was over 300 laps before we would see the next lead change. And there would only be one point in this race where Brad Keselowski was actually passed on track, and we'll get to that in a bit. Logano slips back to 5th, and he would keep backsliding all throughout the race. Chase Elliott moves up to 3rd. He had a great car all day. Matt DiBenedetto nerfs the 88 a bit in turn 1. The first caution will come out on lap 65 when Michael McDowell loses the right front. Everyone comes in for service, and Keselowski wins the race off pit road. In fact, after each and every one of the cautions and the stage breaks, Keselowski won every single race off of pit road. Every single one. It was nuts. So Kes leads on the restart. Elliott holds Hamlin at bay for 2nd. Elliott tries to catch Keselowski for the lead near the end of the stage and nearly has him, but Keselowski wins stage number 1. Everybody comes in for service. Kes once again wins the race off pit road, so he leads at the start of stage number 2. Bowyer gets really loose in turn 4 but hangs on to it. Second caution comes out for debris on lap 147, and also some axle grease from the 15 of Ross Chastain. He would have to spend about 70 laps behind the wall in order to get that repaired. So Kes leads on the restart. Hamlin gets by Elliott for 2nd. Logano drops back to 9th on lap 164. Elliott gets back around Hamlin for 2nd. And then Blaney gets by Hamlin for 3rd. Truex gets around Kevin Harvick for 6th. So Elliott starts closing on Kes for the lead. Johnson goes a lap down, which is a bit surprising, although, you know, like we've said in the past, he is on the back half of his career, and plus Hendrick hasn't really been that good as a whole. Like I said many times before, it seemed like the only one who's pulling his weight at Hendrick right now is Chase Elliott, and it showed today. Kyle Busch going backwards late in stage 2. I mean, his car wasn't that good early and late in stage 2, but they did get it turned around for stage 3. Daniel Suarez moving up to the field, and he's up to 10th at this point. Blaney moves past Elliott in the 2nd. Blaney starts catching Keselowski for the lead with 10 laps to go in stage 2. Almirola and Truex battle for 5th, and Keselowski holds off Blaney to win stage number 2. So Keselowski has won the first 2 stages. Everyone comes in for service. Keselowski once again wins the stage race off pit road. Elliott moves up to 2nd. And then Denny Hamlin gets nabbed for an uncontrolled tire. Ouch. And Ty Dillon gets nabbed for speeding a 2nd time. So Kes leads on the restart. Almirola gets booted by Kyle Busch and loses 6 spots. The 3rd caution comes out on lap 313 when Ty Dillon spins William Byron in turn 4. Keselowski wins the race off pit road once again. Clint Bowyer gets hit for speeding this time around. And Keselowski leads on the restart, of course. Logano smacks the wall and off of turn 2. And then we finally get our 2nd pure lead change of the day on lap 326 when Chase Elliott gets around Keselowski for the lead. Unfortunately, that would be the final pure lead change of the day. Not indicative of the racing, though. The racing was pretty good. Contact with the 42 of Kyle Larson cut both of the left side tires on Eric Jones. He was able to make it to pit road, and there was surprisingly not a caution for it. Blaney gets around Kyle Busch for 3rd, and then we have our 4th caution on lap 371 when Matt Tifft hits the wall in turn 2. Everyone comes in for service. Keselowski wins the race off pit road again and regains the lead, and he would never relinquish it again for the remainder of the race. Clint Bowyer gets hit for speeding again, so that's twice that Clint Bowyer gets hit for speeding. Keselowski leads on the restart. Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott fight hard for 2nd. Elliott fights Busch off on the outside. The battle for second heats back up with 78 laps to go. Blaney coming up behind both Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott. And Blaney actually manages to get around Kyle Busch for third. And then we have our fifth and final caution on lap 446 when Ross Chastain comes to a stop in turns 1 and 2. Looked like he had a mechanical problem. Everyone comes in for service, and to no one's surprise, Keselowski wins the race off pit road. This time Kyle Busch actually wins, earns second place off of pit road. So Kes leads on the final restart of the day. Busch actually gets into the left rear quarter panel of Keselowski, but Keselowski holds on to the lead. And then Elliott goes and passes Kyle Busch on the outside in turns 1 and 2 and gets second place. And I'm thinking, damn, that was a hell of a move. The top three are within 0.6 seconds of each other with 25 laps to go. The laps start winding down. Keselowski got away from Elliott for a bit, but then Elliott changed his line and started running up higher on the track. Basically trying to run the second lane and then diving it down in turns 2 and 4, and was actually catching back up with Keselowski. Unfortunately, it was too little too late, and Brad Keselowski wins the STP 500 after leading 446 of the 500 laps. That's insane. 446 laps. The last time I think someone led more than 400 laps in a cup race was Matt Kenseth at Bristol. And I can't remember what year it was. But yeah, that was an absolutely dominating race for Kenseth in that one. But Brad Keselowski, 446 laps. Which is highly irregular this season. I mean, in the first 5 or 6 races this year, well, the first 5 races of this year, the driver who led the most laps didn't really lead all that many in comparison to anyone else. But today, it was absolutely a dominating performance by Brad Keselowski as he owns his 29th career Cup Series victory. Strangely enough, though, despite the fact that Keselowski dominated the race was still pretty alright. I mean, we had some close racing, we had some rubbing, some beating and banging. Chase Elliott had a run there at the end, but it was just too little too late. And Brad Keselowski sweeps both stages and wins the race and gets the perfect 60. And earns all 7 playoff points. So he's definitely going to be a factor once we get into the playoffs later this season. But as far as the race itself is concerned, my final rating for the STP 500 at Martinsville, I'll give it a 5.75 out of 10. Wasn't exactly to what we're used to seeing at Martinsville, which is crazy stuff going on. But overall, it was still a pretty good race. I mean, it wasn't super special awesome, but it was still enjoyable for the most part, despite the fact that Brad Keselowski dominated the race. There were a lot of great battles in the mid-pack, and, you know, in the top 5 as well. So, I think overall, pretty solid weekend, and definitely a hell of a lot better than last weekend was. So, that's pretty much going to do it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan, signing out.